So from the year 1969, I would like to talk about time traveling today. Time traveling and or being a vampire. Hello, if you're new here, my name is Maudlin. I'm a mad scientist of fashion. I'm very much vintage inspired. The thing about the past is there's so much of it. There's so much of it to draw reference from and inspiration from. And I thought the logical conclusion of being a vintage inspired person would be to pepper in sort of like a sci-fi or fantasy element and be from multiple decades at once. To be fair, this is sort of my personal style just already right off the bat, but I would like to just do a little field guide of how to dress like a time traveler or a vampire who has forgotten what decade they're in. It's all about the juxtaposition, so just walk with me. First and foremost, let's talk about the base, like the top-bottom shoe situation. I would say I really like reproduction sort of garments. These are completely 100% brand new items that are based on items of the past, and I'll give you a couple of examples. One is the t-shirt company Branco. Not only are they doing reproduction t-shirts, they're doing reproduction t-shirts for gay and lesbian bars from the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Love that. Obsessed with that. Like, imagine you were a vampire at one of these such establishments. You bought a t-shirt and now you're wearing it in 2025 and it's like, ooh, maybe I was there, you know? Like, I love that. I'm really obsessed with that. Here are just like some examples I'll pepper in so you can see what I'm talking about. I of course love the ones in Baltimore. That's kind of like my jam. Not gay and lesbian related, but there is like a Ringo for President t-shirt too that I love, and I just love this brand. I'm hoping to just like snag a tee one of these days, especially if it has Tom of Finland characters on it. Like, I love that. The next sort of reproduction company that I vibe with is American Duchess. This is the shoe company if you're a historical fashion kind of girly. They've got Georgian shoes, Victorian shoes, Edwardian shoes, 1920s, 1940s. I mean, it's just their attention to detail in historical footwear is impeccable. Now, of course, because these shoes are so well made and so specific and so niche, they are a pretty penny. I do not have an American Duchess pair of shoes, but I can vouch for how awesome the styles are. And I will also say sometimes they do shoe styles in wide sizes, which is great for a wide-footed girl like myself. Then I would love to talk about one of my favorite tank tops that I own right now, which is this tank from Fashion Brand Company. It is a reproduction of this tank top that the stunning Carrie Fisher wore in an interview in the 70s, and there are spit and image. It's like a perfect reproduction. I love this tee because it's so interesting. It kind of gives 1970s. It also kind of gives Y2K. It's got Cynic on it in beautiful rhinestones. It's just like one of my favorite tanks ever. Love that. And then I will say there are reproduction medieval brooches on eBay that I love. I have one of a cat that is eating a mouse that says "I caught the mouse." It's in like Old English or something. It's very cool. It's very cute. Love to just like I would totally put it on like an 80s blazer to imply that I have seen some shit. That's the kind of vibe I want to give off. And I will just say brooches in general do give off that vibe if you wear a brooch in an earnest, interesting way. They just are kind of old-fashioned as accessories, but they're so fantabulously maximalist that I wholeheartedly recommend bringing them back. These are just some of my brooches in my brooch collection. A beat, also very medieval. Not medieval, but this is my mom's brooch for, it's a map of Little Rock, Arkansas. I've got a lute brooch, again, very medieval, but this is like Avon, so it's also kind of 60s medieval revival. Moon and Star. You know, and then you can get these kind of fun pins to go all over everything. I just think juxtaposing different pins and brooches Speaking of pins and brooches, I will say that there are also reproduction button pins that kind of evoke a 60s and 70s kind of mood. So putting that next to a reproduction medieval brooch seems to imply that you were in both eras. I mean, come on. So reproductions are a great component of a time traveler slash vampire outfit. However, I will also say very good imitations of past garments are also good, especially if you're a little bit bigger like me. Sometimes it's really hard to find genuine vintage items in my size. So I sometimes will look at the 80s, 90s, early 2000s kind of plus size garments like Sag Harbor and Pendleton and that kind of thing, because they can often evoke decades of the past, like the 50s. You know, there was a big 80s does 50s, there was a big 80s does Victorian. So I do kind of look at these like frumpy garments from the 80s and 90s and then see if I can upcycle them into something greater than they were originally meant to be. You sort of just have to know it when you see it, like this semi-new garment is evoking a sort of silhouette of the past. And then I will say one part of being a time traveler is also going to the future. So adding futuristic elements into these vintage inspired outfits can be really cool too. I think a lot of 80s jewelry is really futuristic and interesting. Studio Cult is a modern day company that has really futuristic jewelry, and I just think they're really cool. The tank top I mentioned earlier from Fashion Brand Company also has this very interesting intersection of futuristic with vintage inspired styles that I really like. And the last thing I'll say for this fun little experiment of mine is mixing and matching makeup and hair. I think it would be really cool to start wearing your hair in like an obscure way to just kind of always look like you're from the past or the future. There are all of these like really cool hairstyles from the past that I've been looking at on Pinterest, and I'll give a couple of examples. So not only is it kind of vintage, it's also kind of futuristic because it's just like an uncommon hairstyle. And the same can kind of be said about medieval hairstyles, is they're kind of got these strange, intricate braids that can look they can look futuristic in that they're so alien from our present times, if that makes sense. And sort of like mixing and matching decades of makeup on your face. I sort of did a Shelley Duvall 70s meets 20s sort of thing with my eyes today. So it's just all about just like playing with putting different decades and eras together in a big mush, and maybe being a little futuristic with it, maybe being a little vampiric with it. I don't know, these are just like my thoughts and feelings. I've sort of had this idea conceptualizing for a little while now, and I think it's a good way to kind of categorize my style already. But yeah, I want to know what you think. I want to know your questions, comments, concerns, suggestions. I'm thinking I'm going to assemble a lookbook of sorts of this sort of fantasy sci-fi realm vintage inspired outfits pretty soon, and I hope you'll stick around to see how it turns out. And until next time, bye!